Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Diving into this Tennessee offense, little late night, the fellas were watching some Tennessee games and started talking about what this Tennessee offense can look like under Joe Milton and how can this offense be special. Now, before we get into it again, just want to say thank you to you guys. It's been truly a blast, especially with the Vols fans, talking this Tennessee recruiting class. The fellas are excited to talk about what this Tennessee team is going to look like in 2023 on the field. The support you guys have shown, over 7,000 subscribers. Can't thank you guys enough. So one, if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And then two, love to hear from you guys in the comment sections. That's the best part about doing these, is learning from you guys, hearing your guys' takes, chopping it up with you guys in the comment section. So let us know. And without further ado, Del, I'm going to kick this one off to you. Tennessee offense going into 2023, Joe Milton at the helm.
I mean, it's going to be about Joe Milton, continuous development, frankly, that the path he's on. I mean, you go back to the Michigan days, you saw flashes of greatness, but then you saw some real bad lows. Through his Tennessee career, again, in 21, he didn't necessarily start out hot. You go look at him in that Tennessee game, looked a lot better than you've ever really seen Joe Milton look. Now, can he take that final jump and fill out all that talent and be the guy, that special player that he's got the capability of being?
Yeah, there hasn't been a player that's gotten the hype Joe Milton has in the offseason. And like rightfully so. You don't see this is a generational arm we're talking about. And as Michigan fans, we've seen it. I remember, like, this was 4 years ago, getting so excited for Joe Milton to start at quarterback. Jim Harbaugh, as much as he's kind of been branded as like the QB whisperer, hasn't had that much success with quarterbacks. And to be quite frank, as a Michigan fan, it's just a fact. Now, Josh Heupel, on the other hand, has had a ton of success. You talk about Hendon Hooker was benched at Virginia Tech. He comes to Tennessee and has some of the more impressive years you'll see of a college football quarterback, Heisman-level player. Josh Heupel's been able to get it done with quarterbacks and kind of show how talented they are. I think Josh Heupel can do it with Joe Milton.
And that'll be the thing. It's not about Joe Milton's like arm talent, what he can do. We all know he's got that. It's going to be about, can he play with composure and poise and get the ball out on time? Those have been the things that I think have slowed him down, especially getting the ball out. It does feel like he holds on to it. You even saw a little bit of that in that Clemson game. You see him holding it too long. And again, this Josh Heupel offense, I think it does help quarterbacks get it out. It is built on timing, playing in space, getting the ball across the field, which obviously Joe Milton, he's got the arm to do that, to dot it out, outside, inside, wherever he's got to get it to, he can do it. It just will be, can he work read to read and get the ball out on time? Because that's really been the thing that has felt like it slowed him down at times in his college career.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Like, you look back at Hendon Hooker and why he was so good in this Tennessee offense, extremely accurate with the football, but also an elite processor in terms of getting the football out on time accurately. That Tennessee team was one of the best in terms of not taking sacks last year. Joe Milton, when you turned on the tape, and this was the game you're watching, the Clemson game in the bowl game, he did hold the football. Like, it definitely looked a little bit more choppier than Hendon Hooker had that Tennessee offense. So can he process? Can he throw the ball on time and accurately? That's the big questions you have.
But the thing you're looking for is he's made improvements now over the course of his career.
Yes.
His starting at Tennessee, or like even going back to Michigan, obviously the consistency just wasn't there. He did take a lot of sacks, didn't necessarily get the ball out on time. Tennessee year one, kind of similar issues. And then in that Clemson game, we are nitpicking a little bit because, frankly, a lot of times the ball did come out on time where it needed to be.
And they put up 35 points on legitimately one of the best defenses in college football.
They were all playing. Like, it wasn't like that Clemson team nailed that. All their big dogs were in that game.
And I guess that's a nice way to segue to what's around Joe Milton. Like, we talked about not the concerns, but what we need to see from Joe Milton. You didn't see Jalen Hyatt. You didn't see Cedric Tillman playing in the bowl game. And those weapons look pretty damn good. And I want to start with Bru McCoy, who I think is one of the most criminally underrated receivers in college football as we head into 2023. Not only in college football, but the NFL draft community as well. I think he's a bona fide NFL dude. You won't see many more physical wide receivers at the catch point and using their body. You have Bru McCoy as kind of your wide receiver. I kind of see him as that Cedric Tillman-esque big body guy. And then, Dale, we got to talk about Squirrel White, who, you talk about electricity, you talk about using that Joe Milton cannon. Squirrel White's going to let Joe Milton air it out.
And that'll be the thing. He's a guy who will allow them to stretch the field, which you need when you're playing with Joe Milton. Not like you need it, but it just opens up the offense so much because you kind of need to have a safety back there, have a cornerback who can really play the ball effectively in the air because it can be up there 60, 70 yards, and he can put it on a dot to those guys. And you talk about stretching the field. We're not even getting to a guy in Dante Thornton yet who
my guy.
No one's talking about him. When he came over from Oregon, I mean, he was legit stud last year at Oregon, and I feel like people kind of forget him. And the fact that he's listed as a backup on this depth chart, I think is silly. Dante Thornton's going to be on the field a ton, and I think he's going to put up some major numbers.
And you talk about like replacing Jalen Hyatt and how much of like a mismatch nightmare he was and how good Josh Heupel was at getting him against nickels, getting him against safeties, and then just going to work. Squirrel White and Dante Thornton Jr. are going to put defenses in such a bind because one of them is going to be on a nickel. One of them is going to be on a safety. And if that happens, like you're going to see a lot of what you saw from Jalen Hyatt, which is barbecue chicken. We're going to beat you vertically because Dante Thornton Jr., 6'4", 210 pounds, runs a sub 11 second 100 meter coming out of high school. You're talking about you talk about field stretch and we talk Squirrel White. Dante Thornton Jr. certainly can do it too. And I feel like we're also ignoring Ramel Keaton, who's about as solid as they come. They have a nice blend of wide receivers that do a lot of different things. And as a recruiting nerd, I'm just going to shout out Nate Spillman as well. Nate Spillman's going to play as a freshman. Cam Seldon, they're going to play as a freshman. The pass catchers, I'm not going to go as far in saying like they're better than they were in 2022 because Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman are really special. I don't think the downgrade is as big as the national media, and even myself at times likes to point out. We have two more position groups to talk about, and groups that, I mean, are relatively good. Let's start up front. You lose Darnell Wright. John Campbell Jr. coming in from Miami, he was a very sought-after tackle in the transfer portal. A really nice addition to Tennessee to kind of shore up that offensive line.
Yeah, because really you got pretty much the rest of that. A lot of guys coming back. I mean, Spraggins and Mays.
Spraggins is a dog.
They'll be like one of the better interior combos you got. Obviously,
yes.
Jeremiah Crawford played a fair amount last year and looked very good. So you pretty much did replace the one guy you needed to replace with John Campbell Jr. And again, we talk about when you're that type of team like Tennessee and you can go into the transfer portal and land one of those premier tackles, that's huge. You see teams like Michigan and in Ohio State, like that's kind of how they do it. When they lose a guy, they just go get in the portal. They take care of it, and that's what Josh Heupel did. He didn't go crazy in the portal and overall his whole team, but I think they made, again, in a guy like John Campbell Jr., those targeted acquisitions that shore up the positions.
That's actually a nice conversation to have that speaks to, I think, where Josh Heupel has this roster. Like a lot of programs have that luxury of, hey, we don't have that many holes. And I think we've had this conversation is using the transfer portal as a supplement, not as a primary way to build a roster, because that's not really sustainable. You look at the top programs, that's not how they do it. Josh Heupel hasn't been doing it that way either. He's recruited the high school ranks really, really well. He used the transfer portal as he was kind of getting into his tenure. But now it's like, all right, we lost Jalen Hyatt. Can we get someone who kind of stretch the field? Dante Thornton Jr., really nice addition. We lost a guy in Darnell Wright. We're not really sure if we want to get some more, at least competition in that tackle room. You go and get John Campbell Jr. It's not a complete overhaul of all your pass catchers and all your offensive linemen in the transfer portal. And then a staple of running backs. And Tennessee doesn't get enough credit for how well they run the football. Josh Heupel is a master at putting defenses in conflict. And I know that that's a common talking point, but it's a numbers game. Like if you want, like you saw Clemson go into a 3-man front a lot and kind of working at trying to stop Joe Milton throwing the football. And when they got numbers, like this Tennessee team can bang it down anybody's throat. I mean, in terms of running the football, even again, I mean, you look at Clemson's offensive line, or Clemson's defensive line, their front seven. That whole front seven is either in the NFL or going to be in the NFL. And Tennessee ran the football quite well in the bowl game.
I mean, and you got two guys who I think are just perfectly set up for this system. Two guys, I think, who operate really well in space, which is pretty much where you exist in this Tennessee offense. And guys who, again, can get on the perimeter and make it happen. So I just think you got two guys who now have both played in the system, taken a lot of carries, and both have kind of thrived in that system. Like they're not necessarily guys who would maybe thrive at a Wisconsin where they're just running straight into like lineman's back and trying to push the pile. That's not necessarily these two guys' game, but they're elite in space and they're really good at making guys miss. And they've rattled off a ton of big plays from this running game. So again, to get these two back along with a really tough offensive line, they're kind of giving Joe Milton everything he needs to be really successful, I think.
Yeah, and you take a look at this Tennessee team heading into 2023. We've talked about this a lot. This Tennessee program, you have the conversation of who's going to kind of break through the Alabama and Georgia as the top dogs. LSU nipping at the feet. It's really hard to ignore what Josh Heupel's doing. Not only the product, what he's putting on the field, but what he's doing on the recruiting trail, I should say, as well. We should do a deep dive on this Tennessee defense. We're not going to do it right now, but consistently, this offense, as long as Josh Heupel's in Knoxville, this offense is going to be good. Now, this defense, they're slowly getting some difference makers on the defensive side of the ball. They did in the 2023 class. They're doing it right now in the 2024 class. That's kind of where Tennessee takes that step. I think this defense heading into 2023 is in the best spot we've seen it. If Joe Milton can kind of take over and just kind of take over where Hendon Hooker left off, this is going to be one of the more special teams in the country. And again, this offense not getting enough credit for how good it's going to be in 2023. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys as usual. And if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate y'all. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.